The staff at St. Luke's Hospital froze as the German Shepherd burst through the sliding doors, trailing Arizona dust and the scent of the streets. Security guard Frank Miller reached for his radio while Nurse Sarah Mitchell dropped her clipboard. The dog scarred, one eye clouded. Fur matted against prominent ribs moved with military precision despite his pronounced limp. "Get that mud out of here," someone shouted. But Sarah noticed what dangled from the dog's mouth, a black garbage bag, swinging gently as he navigated between gurneys. When cornered against the triage desk, the shepherd didn't growl. Instead, he carefully set the bag down, then backed away 3 deliberate steps. Sarah approached slowly, ignoring Frank's warning. She crouched and gently opened the plastic. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice vanishing as her hands began to tremble. "Someone get Dr. Anderson. Now!" Hey. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Max hadn't always been a ghost. 8 years earlier, he'd been Storm the Pride of the 75th Ranger Battalion's K-9 unit in Afghanistan. His handler, Staff Sergeant James Wilson, had trained him since he was a pup. Together they'd located dozens of IEDs and saved countless American lives. Max still remembered the smell of boot polish and gunpowder, the weight of tactical gear against his back, and the gentle hand that would scratch behind his ears after successful missions. That was before the explosion that took everything. A routine patrol outside Kandahar turned deadly when insurgents detonated a roadside bomb. Max had sensed something wrong seconds before, but his warning came too late. The blast threw him 20 feet and killed 2 soldiers instantly. James, critically injured, was evacuated while an unconscious Max was treated at the field hospital. That's where he first met Sarah Mitchell, though neither would remember their brief encounter until much later. She had been the combat nurse who removed shrapnel from his side and eye, whispering encouragements while he drifted in and out of consciousness. The military declared Max too traumatized for continued service. Despite promises to reunite him with James, Max was instead adopted by a Phoenix family unprepared for a dog with war wounds, both visible and invisible. Sarah Mitchell carried her own scars from Afghanistan. 3 tours as a combat nurse had shown her humanity at its worst and best. She'd lost her fiancé not to enemy fire, but to the distance war created between them. When she returned stateside, she discovered she was pregnant. But the stress and physical toll of deployment led to a miscarriage. The loss hollowed her out. Now, at 34, she worked night shifts in St. Luke's ER, living alone in a small apartment with walls thin enough to hear neighbors arguing through them. Dr. Robert Anderson, Old Bob to the staff, had taken Sarah under his wing when she joined St. Luke's. At 58, with salt and pepper hair and permanent smile lines etched around cynical eyes, he'd seen it all. Twice divorced and counting down to retirement, he recognized in Sarah the same dedication that had cost him his marriages. He tried, unsuccessfully, to teach her to care a little less. Phoenix in July burned like the inside of a furnace, while wealthy residents retreated to air-conditioned mansions in Scottsdale. St. Luke's overflowed with heat stroke victims, mostly elderly and homeless people with nowhere cool to go. The hospital, understaffed and underfunded, served a working-class community too often overlooked. Dawn broke over Phoenix like a cracked egg, yellow and hot, even at 5:30 a.m. Max emerged from his hiding place beneath the loading dock of Montoya's grocery, shaking dust from his coat. The night had been restless, filled with phantom explosions that only he could hear. 8 years removed from war, and still the memories ambushed him like enemy combatants. His morning routine never varied. First, water from the leaky spigot behind the Chinese restaurant on Camelback Road, then a careful patrol of his territory, 6 blocks of working-class neighborhood where most people either ignored him or left out scraps. Some called him the ghost dog because of his ability to appear and disappear like smoke. Few noticed his military bearing or the faded tattoo in his ear. Fewer still attempted to approach him. Today, hunger drove him toward the dumpsters behind Sunset View Apartments. The complex had seen better days. Stucco crumbled from corners, and air conditioning units dripped constant tears onto the parched ground. But the residents often discarded food that was perfectly good by Max's standards. As he rounded the corner into the alley, a memory ambushed him, the smell of burnt metal and blood. James's voice shouting commands as the world exploded around them. Max stopped, hackles raised, waiting for the flashback to pass. 8 seconds. That's how long they usually lasted. 8 seconds of being back there, of feeling the desert heat and tasting sand. When reality returned, a new sound caught his attention, a weak, mewling cry barely audible coming from behind the dumpster. Max approached cautiously, ears forward, good eye scanning for threats. His nose twitched at unfamiliar yet instinctively important scents: blood, birth, and human infant. Behind the dumpster lay a torn black garbage bag, partially opened, partially. Inside, a newborn baby girl, umbilical cord still attached, wrapped in a blood-stained towel. She wasn't moving much, her skin taking on a bluish tinge in the early morning light. Max recognized the stillness that precedes death. He'd seen it too many times not to know. Something ancient and profound stirred in him. Perhaps it was his training to protect human life, or perhaps something more primal. He nosed the bag gently, confirming his discovery. The baby gave another weak cry, more a whisper than a wail. Max made a decision that wasn't really a decision at all. With careful precision, he took the edge of the bag between his teeth, lifted it, and began walking. The weight was nothing compared to the tactical gear he'd once carried. The responsibility, however, felt immense. He knew where to go. During his 3 years on the streets, he'd learned the geography of human mercy. St. Luke's Hospital stood 20 blocks away. He'd circled it many nights, drawn by some forgotten association with medical tents and the hands that had once tended his wounds. Sometimes he'd watch ambulances arrive, catching glimpses of gurneys and uniformed personnel that triggered fragmentary memories. The journey would not be easy. 20 blocks meant crossing major streets, avoiding cars, and navigating through areas where humans might try to stop him. But the weight of the bag against his teeth anchored him to the moment. Keeping the flashbacks at bay, Max moved with purpose, using alleys and side streets when possible. The morning heat intensified with each passing minute, promising another brutal summer day. At Apache Boulevard, he waited patiently for the crossing signal, a behavior that caused a woman at the bus stop to do a double-take. "Would you look at that?" she muttered to no one in particular. "That dog's waiting for the light." The baby had gone silent, which Max knew wasn't good. He picked up his pace, ignoring the pain in his hindquarters where shrapnel had once torn through muscle. pain was an old companion. He knew how to function despite it. At Fillmore Street, a mail carrier spotted him and pointed. "Hey, that dog's got something." Max didn't break stride. Even when the man began following, the hospital was now 8 blocks away. Memories flickered as he trotted the field hospital in Kandahar, the smell of antiseptic and blood, the gentle hands of a nurse with auburn hair who had spoken softly while removing metal from his flesh. The weight of the bag pulled him back to the present, to his mission. 6 blocks from the hospital. Disaster nearly struck. A group of teenagers on skateboards rounded a corner, nearly colliding with Max. One board clattered against his flank, startling him. He managed to keep his grip on the precious bag, but had to dart into traffic to avoid the teens. A taxi screeched to a halt inches from him, the driver leaning on his horn. "Crazy mutt!" the man shouted, but Max was already across the street, heart pounding, focused entirely on his objective. The final approach to St. Luke's took him past the hospital's small park, where patients in wheelchairs sometimes sat in the shade of drought-resistant trees. An orderly spotted him and pointed. "Is that dog carrying something?" Max ignored the growing attention. The hospital entrance was now visible automatic sliding doors that opened when humans approached. He'd need to time it right or wait for someone to enter or exit. Fortune favored him. An elderly couple emerged, the doors sliding open. Max darted forward, slipping past them into the air-conditioned lobby. The cold tile against his paws felt alien after the scorching pavement. Inside, chaos erupted immediately. A receptionist stood up, pointing. "Dog. There's a dog in here." Security guard Frank Miller, halfway through his morning coffee, nearly dropped his cup. "What the—" Max didn't hesitate. Instinct and memory guided him deeper into the hospital, past the reception desk and toward the emergency department. Humans scattered before him, some shouting, others reaching for phones. The scent of antiseptic and illness filled his nostrils, mingling with forgotten memories of medical tents and triage. "Someone catch that animal!" a voice called out. But Max was moving with the efficiency that had once made him the pride of his unit, down corridors, past supply closets, heading toward the heart of the building where he sensed he needed to be. He rounded a corner and found himself in a small lounge area. 3 nurses sat with coffee cups, momentarily frozen in surprise at his appearance. 2 jumped up, faces alarmed. "Get it out of here!" one shouted. But the third, auburn-haired, with tired eyes that had seen too much, remained seated, studying him with an intensity that cut through his wariness. Something about her scent triggered a distant memory, gentle hands, soft words, pain ebbing. Sarah Mitchell saw beyond the matted fur and scars. She saw the intelligence in his eyes, the purpose in his stance. "Wait," she said to her colleagues, standing slowly. "He's carrying something." Max stood his ground as she approached, recognizing something he couldn't quite place. When she was 3 feet away, he gently lowered the bag to the floor, then stepped back, maintaining eye contact. His mission was nearly complete. Sarah Mitchell dropped to her knees beside the black plastic bag, her nurse's instincts overriding any hesitation. The German shepherd watched her with an unnerving intensity. His scarred body held in perfect stillness despite the commotion around them. "Be careful, Sarah," warned Nancy, the older nurse who'd jumped up. "That dog could be dangerous." Sarah barely heard her. She gently opened the bag, and her breath caught in her throat. Inside lay a newborn baby girl, skin tinged with a dangerous blue, umbilical cord still attached and crudely tied off with what looked like a shoelace. The infant wasn't moving. "Oh my God!" Sarah gasped. Years of emergency training kicked in. "Call a code, get Dr. Anderson and the NICU team down here now." The room erupted into motion. Nancy rushed to the phone while the third nurse, Tyler, sprinted toward the emergency department. Sarah carefully lifted the tiny infant from the bag. The baby was cold to the touch, hypothermic despite the summer heat, and barely breathing. "Come on, little one," Sarah whispered, cradling the newborn against her chest for warmth while checking vital signs. "Stay with us." Within seconds, the room filled with medical personnel. Dr. Anderson arrived first, his face shifting from irritation to focused concern as he assessed the situation. "Where did he began. The dog brought her," Sarah explained, nodding toward Max, who remained in the corner, watching the proceedings with alert interest. "She's hypothermic, bradycardic, minimal respiratory effort. Umbilical cord suggests she's less than 24 hours old." Dr. Anderson didn't waste time questioning the extraordinary circumstances. "Get her to NICU stat. Start warming protocols, IV fluids, glucose, and antibiotics. Someone call security and the police." As they whisked the baby away, Sarah found herself reluctant to leave. Something about the dog held her attention. Something familiar she couldn't quite place. Security guard Frank Miller arrived, radio in hand. "That's the dog that ran in," he confirmed. "I'll call animal control." "Wait," Sarah said, surprising herself. "He saved that baby's life." Frank looked skeptical. "It's a stray, Sarah. Probably dangerous." The dog hadn't moved, his eyes fixed on Sarah with an intelligence that seemed almost human. Despite his scarred appearance, he showed no aggression. Sarah approached slowly, hand extended. Max remained still, allowing her to come closer. "He's not going to hurt anyone," she said with certainty. As her hand neared his head, Max dipped slightly, allowing her to touch him. The contact sent an odd sense of déjà vu through Sarah. Her fingers found a raised area behind his ear, and curiosity made her part the matted fur. There, partially obscured, was a tattooed number and insignia she recognized immediately from her military days. "He's a military dog," she breathed. "Afghanistan deployment? Probably." "Look at this tattoo." Frank peered closer but maintained his distance. "How'd he end up here?" Sarah's mind raced with fragmented memories. A field hospital outside Kandahar, a wounded dog brought in after an IED explosion. Could it be the same animal? The timing would be right. But what were the odds? "I need to check on the baby," she said finally. "Can you make sure no one takes him, at least until I get back?" Frank sighed but nodded. 20 minutes. Sarah, then I'm calling animal control." Upstairs in the NICU, organized chaos surrounded the abandoned newborn. Dr. Anderson directed the team with the efficient precision that had earned him respect throughout the hospital. The baby had been intubated, warming blankets applied, and IV lines established. "How is she?" Sarah asked, slipping back into her professional role. critical but responding. Dr. Anderson replied. Core temperature was 89 degrees. Another hour outside, and we'd be having a different conversation. He glanced at Sarah. Police are on their way. Where's the mother? Unknown. The dog just carried her in. Dr. Anderson's eyebrows shot up. That's one for the books. He lowered his voice. Sarah, that infant was born somewhere within the last 12 hours. No hospital birth, the cord wasn't clamped professionally. Someone gave birth and then put that baby in a garbage bag. The implications hung heavy in the air. Sarah nodded, her throat tight. I know. Police will need to take your statement. This is abandonment at best, attempted murder at worst. Sarah watched the tiny chest rise and fall with each ventilator-assisted breath. The dog knew to bring her here. How is that possible? Before Dr. Anderson could respond, 2 Phoenix police officers entered the NICU anteroom. Detective Marcus Reed, a broad-shouldered man with prematurely gray hair, introduced himself and his partner, Officer Jennifer Oakes. We understand you have an abandoned infant, Reed stated, notebook already in hand. Sarah and Dr. Anderson explained the extraordinary circumstances. Detective Reed's expression remained neutral, but Officer Oakes couldn't hide her astonishment. A dog brought in a newborn in a garbage bag, she repeated, as if hoping she'd misheard. Security footage confirmed it, Dr. Anderson said. The dog entered the hospital at 6:42 a.m. carrying the bag. Where is this dog now? Reed asked. Security has him downstairs, Sarah replied. He's not aggressive. In fact, he's a military dog, has a deployment tattoo in his ear. This caught Reed's attention. Military. That's unusual. Most service dogs stay with their handlers or get adopted through official channels. Unless something went wrong, Sarah suggested. She couldn't shake the feeling that she knew this dog somehow. The conversation was interrupted by a nurse rushing in. Dr. Anderson, we need you. The baby's pressure is dropping. As the medical team refocused on the infant, Detective Reed turned to Sarah. I need to see this dog and the exact location where the baby was found. We'll also need the garbage bag for evidence. Sarah led the officers downstairs, relieved to find Max still waiting patiently beside Frank. The security guard looked surprised. Strangest thing, he said. Dog hasn't moved an inch, just sits there like he's on duty or something. Detective Reed approached cautiously, but Max showed no signs of fear or aggression. Military training, Reed observed. Look at that posture. Officer Oakes remained by the door. Should we call animal control? Let me check something first, Reed said, pulling out his phone. He took several pictures of Max, including close-ups of the ear tattoo. I have a contact at the Military Working Dog Program. Let me send these over. While Reed made his call, Sarah knelt beside Max. Something about his eyes haunted her the way he watched her, as if trying to communicate something important. When she touched his scarred flank, he leaned slightly into her hand. You saved that baby, she whispered. How did you know? Reed ended his call and rejoined them. My contact says the tattoo identifies him as a military working dog deployed to Afghanistan in 2015. Name's Max, handled by Staff Sergeant James Wilson, 75th Ranger Regiment. He was reported missing in action after an IED attack in 2017. Missing in action. For a dog? Frank asked. It happens, Reed explained. Sometimes in attacks. Dogs get separated, some are killed, some are captured. This one obviously made it back stateside somehow. Sarah felt a chill despite the hospital's warmth. I was in Afghanistan in 2017, at the field hospital near Kandahar, as if triggered by her words. Max's ears perked forward. Sarah's memory crystallized. Suddenly, a wounded German shepherd brought in after an IED explosion, shrapnel embedded in his flank and eye. She'd assisted the veterinarian, holding the dog still while they worked to save him. "It's him," she whispered. "I treated him. After the explosion." Before anyone could respond, Sarah's pager buzzed urgently. The NICU needed her back immediately. As she hurried toward the elevator, Detective Reed called after her. "What about the dog?" Sarah hesitated. Hospital protocols strictly prohibited animals except for service dogs. But leaving Max to animal control felt wrong on a level she couldn't articulate. "I'll take responsibility for him," she called back. "Just until we figure this out." Upstairs, more complications awaited. The baby had stabilized, but Dr. Anderson pulled Sarah aside with grave news. Police found a body at Sunset View Apartments. Young woman, apparent suicide. They think she's the mother. Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. How do they know? Evidence of recent childbirth. And here's the kicker. Her name's Jessica Turner. She's one of our nurses. Sarah. Works in pediatrics. Did you know her? Sarah's mind raced. Jessica Turner, quiet, efficient, always volunteering for extra shifts. They'd spoken occasionally but weren't close. Nothing had suggested the young woman was pregnant or in distress. She kept to herself, Sarah managed. I had no idea she was expecting. Dr. Anderson ran a hand through his thinning hair. Nobody did. Apparently, she hid it well. Police are trying to contact her family now. As this news settled over her, a lab technician approached with a tablet. We ran the standard panels on the infant, she explained. Something interesting came up. Baby has a rare blood type B negative, same as you. Nurse Mitchell? Sarah nodded absently, still processing the revelation about Jessica. The coincidence of sharing a blood type with the abandoned newborn barely registered. Also, the technician continued, there was a note in the bag. Police have the original, but they sent over a copy. She handed Sarah a printout. The handwritten message was brief but devastating. Her name is Hope. Please find someone who will love her. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Sarah's shift had officially ended 3 hours ago, but she remained at the hospital, unable to tear herself away from either the abandoned baby or the dog who had saved her. In the small on-call room adjacent to the NICU, she sat on the edge of a cot, her scrubs wrinkled from the day's chaos, watching Max, who lay alert at her feet. Hospital administration had reluctantly allowed the dog to stay after Sarah signed multiple waivers taking full responsibility, and after Dr. Anderson had advocated on her behalf. Just until we sort this out, the hospital director had said with obvious disapproval. Max hadn't left Sarah's side since their reunion, following her through the hospital corridors with disciplined precision that drew stares from staff and patients alike. His presence violated countless regulations, but no one seemed willing to challenge the woman who had just helped save an abandoned newborn or the dog responsible for the miracle. Detective Reed had departed to investigate Jessica Turner's apartment but promised to return with updates. In the meantime, Sarah had made several calls of her own to military contacts from her time in Afghanistan, seeking information about Max and his handler. "I know this sounds crazy," she had told her former commanding officer over the phone, "but I think I've found that German Shepherd from the Kandahar incident, the one whose handler was hit in the IED attack." The response had been guarded but interested. Records would be checked, calls would be made. In the world of military working dogs, each animal represented not just a significant investment, but often a hero in its own right. Max's reappearance would certainly raise questions. A soft knock interrupted Sarah's thoughts. Dr. Anderson entered, his face showing the strain of the extraordinary day. "Baby's stable," he reported, dropping into the chair opposite Sarah. "Breathing on her own now. Lab work looks promising." He glanced at Max, who acknowledged him with a slight tilt of his head. "Remarkable animal. He remembers his training," Sarah said. "Every bit of it." Dr. Anderson nodded thoughtfully. "Police found Jessica's journal. Reed called to give me a heads up. There are mentions of the hospital in it. And you?" Sarah straightened. "Me. I barely knew her." "Apparently, she knew you, or knew of you." He hesitated. "This isn't official yet, but Reed says Jessica was sexually assaulted at a medical conference 9 months ago. She didn't report it. The journal suggests her assailant was Dr. William Prescott." Sarah's breath caught. Dr. Prescott, chief of surgery at Phoenix Memorial, one of the most prominent physicians in Arizona. His reputation for brilliance was matched only by his political connections. That's a serious allegation. Indeed, and one that will be difficult to prove, especially with Jessica gone. Dr. Anderson's expression darkened. "Her parents are flying in tonight. Old money from Boston. Apparently. Reed says they've already retained counsel and are making noise about the hospital's liability." Liability. Their daughter just died. Their granddaughter nearly died too. Which is precisely why lawyers get involved. Dr. Anderson stood wearily. "Administration wants a full staff meeting tomorrow. They're concerned about publicity, a suicidal nurse, an abandoned baby, and now a stray military dog. It's a media circus waiting to happen." After he left, Sarah sat in silence, absently stroking Max's scarred head. The dog leaned against her leg, solid and warm. His presence grounded her in a way she hadn't experienced since returning from Afghanistan. "What happened to you after the explosion?" she whispered. "How did you end up on the streets of Phoenix?" Max watched her with his good eye, alert and seemingly understanding. Sarah remembered the badly wounded animal she'd helped treat after the IED attack, frightened, in pain, but still trying to perform his duties even on the operating table. The veterinarian had sedated him heavily, commenting that such loyalty was both heartbreaking and remarkable. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Reed. "Found something interesting. Coming up?" Minutes later, Reed arrived with a cardboard box labeled "Evidence" and a troubled expression. "Jessica's parents landed early," he said without preamble. "They're at Phoenix Memorial meeting with administration. And Dr. Prescott." Sarah's stomach tightened. "That's concerning." "Indeed. Especially since we found these in Jessica's apartment." Reed opened the box and removed several items, a stack of journals, a USB drive, and a manila folder. Jessica was methodical. She documented everything: the assault, her pregnancy, and her decision to... He paused, glancing at Max. Her decision about the baby. What do you mean? Reed extracted a journal with a blue cover. This is from 2 months ago. She writes about seeing a stray German shepherd near her apartment complex. She recognized it as a military dog from its behavior. She started leaving food out for it. Sarah looked at Max, who remained perfectly still, watching Reed with apparent interest. She tracked his movements, his routines. She knew he regularly circled this hospital. Reed flipped through the journal. This entry from 3 weeks ago. The dog reminds me of Nurse Mitchell, damaged by war but still serving others, still trying to do good in a world that's been cruel. Sarah felt a chill. She was planning this, using Max to bring her baby here. It seems so. Her final entry suggests she specifically wanted you to find the baby. Reed's voice softened. She admired you. Sarah saw something in you that gave her hope. The revelation settled over Sarah like a physical weight. Jessica Turner, a young woman she'd barely noticed, had been watching her, finding parallels between her and a stray military dog. The coincidence was almost too much to process. There's more, Reed continued. The USB drive contains video recordings. Jessica secretly recorded conversations with Dr. Prescott after the assault. He threatens her, mentions his connection to her father. Reed's expression hardened. They knew each other. Sarah, Jessica's father, and Prescott are old friends, college roommates. In fact, the implications were staggering. Had Jessica's own father helped cover up her assault? Was that why she'd hidden her pregnancy? Why she'd ultimately seen no way out except suicide? What happens now? Sarah asked. That depends partly on you. Jessica left a letter naming you as her preferred guardian for the baby. It's not legally binding, but with her parents' character now in question, it could influence the court. Sarah stared at him. Me. She wanted me to raise her child. According to her journals, she'd been observing you for months. She believed you would protect her daughter from the same people who had failed her. Reed nodded toward Max. And she believed the dog would find you, would bring her baby to you specifically. As if understanding, Max rose to his feet and moved closer to Sarah, pressing against her leg. The contact steadied her as the room seemed to tilt. This is a lot, she managed. I know. Reed gathered the materials back into the box. I shouldn't have shown you this yet, but with Jessica's parents already making moves, I thought you should be prepared. He headed for the door. Get some rest, Sarah. Tomorrow's going to be complicated. Sleep proved impossible. Sarah checked on baby Hope hourly, watching the tiny chest rise and fall, marveling at the chain of events that had brought this infant into her care. During her midnight visit to the NICU, Dr. Anderson found her standing beside the incubator. You should go home, he said gently. You've been here nearly 24 hours. I can't leave her, Sarah replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Dr. Anderson studied her for a long moment. Jessica chose well, he said finally. But Sarah, you need to understand what you're potentially taking on. Her parents are wealthy, connected. They'll fight for custody. They didn't care enough to notice their daughter was pregnant and suicidal. That won't matter in family court. They're the biological relatives. Sarah looked down at the sleeping infant. She has a name. You know. Hope. Dr. Anderson nodded. Fitting. He hesitated. What about the dog? Max goes where I go. Sarah. He saved her life. Bob. And I think he saved mine, too. She didn't elaborate on the growing certainty that Max's appearance had pulled her back from her own precipice, the quiet desperation that had become her life since Afghanistan. After another hour of fitful rest in the on-call room, Sarah made a decision. With Max at her side, she descended to the hospital basement where the security office was located. Frank Miller looked up from his monitors in surprise. You're still here with the Wonder Dog. I see. I need a favor. Frank, can you pull up the security footage from this morning when Max came in? Frank shrugged and tapped at his keyboard. Already had it queued up. Been showing it to everyone. Never seen anything like it in 30 years of security work. The grainy video showed the hospital entrance at 6:42 a.m. Max appeared at the bottom of the frame, the black bag clearly visible in his mouth. He waited patiently as an elderly couple exited, then slipped through the closing doors. The footage followed his deliberate path through the hospital, avoiding main corridors when possible, heading with uncanny precision toward the staff lounge where Sarah had been taking her break. He knew exactly where he was going, Frank commented. Straight to you. Sarah watched the footage again, noting Max's military bearing despite his injuries. Can you check the exterior cameras? See where he came from? Frank cycled through several views until they spotted Max approaching the hospital from the east, moving with purpose despite his limp. Can't track him back further than Apache Boulevard, Frank said. That's where our cameras end. Sarah thanked him and headed for the exit, Max following close behind. The night air hit her like a furnace, even at 3 a.m. Phoenix in July offered no relief from the heat. Her car, parked in the staff lot, had become an oven. She rolled down all the windows before gesturing for Max to jump in. Home, she told him, though she wasn't sure if the word meant anything to him. Her apartment in Tempe was a 15-minute drive from the hospital, a modest one-bedroom in a complex populated mostly by students and hospital staff. As she pulled into her assigned space, doubt suddenly gripped her. What was she doing? Bringing a stray military dog to her apartment. What was she considering? Potentially taking responsibility for an abandoned infant. Max waited patiently for her to open the car door, then followed her up the exterior stairs to Unit 214. He entered the apartment cautiously, conducting what appeared to be a room-by-room security sweep before settling near the door. You can relax, Sarah told him, dropping her keys on the counter. We're safe here. She took a quick shower, the hot water washing away some of the day's tension. When she emerged in sleep shorts and a faded army t-shirt, she found Max still at his post by the door. The sight brought an unexpected lump to her throat. How long had it been since anyone had stood watch over her bed, she said, patting the edge of her mattress. Max tilted his head, considering, then approached and settled on the floor beside the bed instead, close enough to protect, but maintaining discipline. Sarah smiled despite herself. Sleep came easier than expected, for the first time in years. No nightmares interrupted her rest. When morning light filtered through her blinds, Sarah woke feeling strangely refreshed despite the meager 4 hours of sleep. Max was already alert, watching her with his one good eye. We need to get you checked out, she told him, noting the matted fur and old scars that needed proper attention. "And I need coffee. Lots of it." Her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Anderson. "Jessica's parents arrived. Meeting at 10 a.m. Bring the dog." Sarah frowned at the strange request, but texted back her confirmation. After a quick breakfast, during which Max politely accepted scrambled eggs but refused toast, she found an old leash in her closet, a remnant from dog-sitting for a colleague years earlier. Max allowed her to attach it to his collar without protest. The drive back to St. Luke's was tense with anticipation. Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Jessica Turner, a young woman she'd barely noticed, and the extraordinary faith she'd placed in both a stray dog and a trauma nurse she'd hardly known. The hospital's administrative wing bustled with unusual activity when they arrived. Sarah spotted several news vans in the parking lot, and the receptionist gave her a significant look as she signed in. "They're waiting for you in the boardroom," she whispered. It's quite the gathering. Indeed, the large conference room was filled beyond capacity. Dr. Anderson stood near the head of the table, alongside the hospital director and legal counsel. Seated opposite were an elegantly dressed older couple, the Turners. Sarah presumed flanked by two men in expensive suits. Detective Reed and Officer Oakes occupied chairs along the wall. Several hospital board members completed the assembly. All conversation stopped when Sarah entered with Max. The German Shepherd's nails clicked softly on the polished floor as they made their way to the empty chairs Dr. Anderson had saved for them. "Ms. Mitchell," the hospital director began. "Thank you for joining us. These are unusual circumstances, to say the least." Charles Turner, Jessica's father, stared coldly at Sarah, then at Max. "Is the animal's presence necessary?" he asked, his Boston accent pronounced. "Actually, yes," Detective Reed interjected. "The dog is material to our investigation." Mrs. Turner dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Our daughter, our granddaughter. This is a family matter that should be handled privately." "Your daughter left specific instructions," Reed countered, nodding toward Sarah. "She wanted Nurse Mitchell to care for baby Hope." "A ridiculous notion," Charles Turner snapped. "We're the child's grandparents. We have resources, a proper home. What can a—" he looked Sarah up and down, "a single nurse possibly offer—" Dr. Anderson cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should discuss Jessica's journal entries first, the ones detailing why she felt unable to turn to her family." Charles Turner's attorney raised a hand. "My clients are in mourning. This is hardly the time to make accusations based on the writings of a clearly troubled young woman." "Troubled? Yes," Reed agreed, "but remarkably clear in documenting the reasons for her distress." He opened a folder, including multiple references to Dr. William Prescott, who I understand is a close friend of the family. The tension in the room thickened. Mrs. Turner paled visibly, while her husband's face flushed with anger. "This is outrageous," Charles Turner began, but his wife touched his arm, silencing him. "What exactly did Jessica write?" Mrs. Turner asked quietly, as Reed began to outline the journal's contents. Max suddenly stiffened beside Sarah, his ears perked forward, and a low growl rumbled in his chest, the first aggressive sound she'd heard from him. All eyes turned toward the dog, then followed his gaze to the doorway. Dr. William Prescott stood there, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. "Sorry I'm late," he said smoothly. Traffic was terrible. The boardroom crackled with tension as Dr. William Prescott strode in, his confidence seemingly impenetrable. Max's growl deepened, the sound vibrating through Sarah's leg where the dog pressed against her. She placed a steadying hand on his back, feeling the muscles coiled tight beneath her fingers. "I don't believe you were invited to this meeting, Dr. Prescott," Detective Reed said, rising from his chair. Prescott smiled thinly. "Charles called me. As a family friend. I thought my presence might be helpful during this difficult time." He moved to stand behind the Turners, placing a hand on Charles's shoulder. "And as chief of surgery at Phoenix Memorial, I have a professional interest in this unusual situation." Sarah felt, rather than saw, Max's reaction, a subtle shift in posture, the growl subsiding into watchful silence. The dog had assessed the threat and was now waiting, gathering information. Sarah found herself mirroring his discipline. Detective Reed exchanged glances with the hospital director, who nodded reluctantly. "Dr. Prescott may stay, but I must emphasize that this meeting concerns a potential criminal investigation." Prescott's expression didn't waver. "All the more reason for the family to have support." He pulled up a chair beside Mrs. Turner, who seemed to shrink at his proximity. Reed resumed his summary of Jessica's journals, carefully neutral in his delivery. The deceased documented multiple instances of harassment following an alleged sexual assault at the Arizona Medical Conference last October. She names Dr. Prescott specifically and describes attempts to report the incident that were discouraged. "By whom?" Sarah asked, unable to contain herself. Reed consulted his notes. According to these entries, Jessica spoke to her father about the incident. She writes that he told her filing charges would destroy her career before it began. All eyes turned to Charles Turner, whose face had gone rigid. "My daughter was troubled," he said stiffly. "She had a history of emotional instability. Whatever she wrote in those journals reflects her perception, not reality." "Was she also mistaken about being pregnant?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet but cutting. "About giving birth alone, about being so desperate she saw suicide as her only option." Mrs. Turner made a small, broken sound. Her husband reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "Jessica's mental state is not the issue here," Prescott interjected smoothly. "The welfare of the child is what matters now, and surely we can all agree that placement with loving grandparents is in her best interest." Sarah opened her mouth to respond, but Dr. Anderson touched her arm in warning. This wasn't the time for a direct confrontation, not when so much was at stake. The hospital's legal counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Martinez, tapped her pen against her legal pad. "Detective Reed, what is the status of your investigation into Jessica Turner's death?" "Active," Reed replied. "We're treating it as a suicide precipitated by traumatic events. The notes she left are quite explicit about her state of mind and her wishes for her daughter." "Notes that have no legal standing," countered the Turners' attorney. "My clients are the baby's closest living relatives. They're financially stable, have a suitable home, and can provide everything the child needs. Except protection from the man who assaulted her mother," Sarah said. no longer able to remain silent. The room went deadly quiet. Prescott's smile never faltered, but his eyes hardened. "That's a serious and unfounded accusation, Nurse Mitchell, one that could have significant legal consequences for you and this hospital." Before anyone could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Dr. Anderson's pager buzzed simultaneously, followed by Sarah's. They exchanged alarmed glances before Dr. Anderson answered the incoming call on the boardroom phone. "Code Blue in NICU," he announced, already moving toward the door. "Baby Hope has stopped breathing." Sarah was on her feet instantly, Max rising with her. As they rushed from the room, she heard chairs scraping as others followed. The hospital corridors blurred as she sprinted toward the neonatal intensive care unit, the German Shepherd keeping perfect pace despite his limp. They arrived to find the NICU in controlled chaos. Dr. Peterson, the neonatologist, was performing chest compressions on the tiny infant, while nurses prepared medications and adjusted equipment. Through the glass, Sarah could see the baby's monitor showing dangerous heart rhythm fluctuations. "What happened?" Dr. Anderson demanded, entering the anteroom and quickly donning protective gear. "Sudden cardiovascular collapse," Dr. Peterson replied without pausing compressions. "She was stable, then crashed without warning. No obvious cause." Sarah felt a cold dread settle in her stomach. Newborns could certainly decompensate rapidly, but the timing seemed too coincidental. Behind her, the Turners and Prescott had arrived, watching through the glass with expressions ranging from shock to calculated assessment. Max stood rigidly beside her, his attention fixed not on the medical drama, but on the people in the anteroom, particularly Prescott. Sarah noticed the dog's focus and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hospital's air conditioning. Inside the NICU, the team worked with practiced efficiency. Medications were administered, fluids pushed, the tiny body monitored for any response. After 3 agonizing minutes, a nurse called out, "We have a pulse." Collective relief washed through the anteroom. Dr. Peterson continued working, stabilizing the infant, while Dr. Anderson stepped out to address the gathered group. "She's responding, but we need to run tests immediately to determine what caused the collapse." His eyes met Sarah's briefly, communicating something unspoken. Charles Turner stepped forward. "We want her transferred to Phoenix Memorial. They have the top-rated NICU in the state." "That's out of the question right now," Dr. Anderson replied firmly. "She's far too unstable to move. As her grandparents, we insist. As her doctor, I refuse." Dr. Anderson cut in, his normally gentle demeanor hardening. "Medically, it would be dangerous and potentially fatal." While this confrontation unfolded, Sarah slipped into the NICU proper, drawn by both professional instinct and a deeper, more personal concern. Baby Hope lay surrounded by equipment, her tiny body fighting for every breath despite the ventilator's assistance. Sarah checked the monitors, noting the concerning patterns in the vital signs. Dr. Peterson joined her, voice low. "We're running toxicology. This presentation doesn't make sense otherwise." Sarah froze. "You think she was poisoned? I think we need to rule it out. The timing is suspicious, especially with all that's happening." Dr. Peterson glanced toward the anteroom. Those grandparents arrived, and suddenly our stable patient crashes. Outside, The sky darkened prematurely. Through the NICU windows, Sarah could see storm clouds gathering, unusual for Phoenix in July. Where monsoon season typically brought dramatic but brief storms, this looked different, more ominous. Lightning flickered in the distance, and within minutes, rain began lashing against the glass. Dr. Anderson re-entered the NICU, his expression grave. "We need to move fast. Security is reviewing visitor logs and camera footage from the last hour. If someone administered something to the baby..." Thunder cracked overhead, so loud it seemed to shake the building. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. "Backup generators are ready if we lose power," a nurse reported. Sarah couldn't tear her eyes from the helpless infant. "I should have stayed with her," she whispered. "I shouldn't have left her alone." "This isn't your fault," Dr. Anderson assured her. "But I need you focused. The baby needs a blood transfusion to help stabilize her. Her blood type is rare. B negative. Like mine." Sarah was already rolling up her sleeve. "Take whatever she needs." As preparations began for the emergency transfusion, the storm intensified. Rain hammered against the windows, and the hospital's lights continued to flicker ominously. Through the glass partition, Sarah could see the Turners engaged in heated conversation with hospital administrators. Prescott stood slightly apart, his face unreadable as he watched the medical team work. Max remained in the anteroom, having been denied entry to the NICU proper despite Sarah's protests. The dog's attention never wavered from the corridor outside, his posture alert to potential threats. The phlebotomist finished drawing Sarah's blood, and the NICU team began the delicate process of transfusion. Baby Hope's vital signs responded almost immediately, strengthening with each passing minute. "Good call," Dr. Peterson murmured to Dr. Anderson. "Her numbers are improving." Outside, thunder cracked again, and this time the lights went out completely. For 3 heart-stopping seconds, darkness engulfed the NICU before the backup generators hummed to life, restoring power to the critical equipment. "Building's on lockdown," a security officer announced over the intercom. "Storm has knocked out power to half the east side. All personnel maintain positions until further notice." In the dim emergency lighting, Sarah noticed something, a small bulge in Max's collar that she hadn't seen before. Moving back to the anteroom, she knelt beside the dog, examining the weathered leather. A small, waterproof pouch was sewn into the lining, nearly invisible unless you knew to look for it. With trembling fingers, Sarah opened the pouch. Inside lay a set of military dog tags and a folded, water-stained photograph. The tags belonged to Staff Sergeant James Wilson, Max's handler. The photograph showed a younger, unscarred Max with a smiling soldier, desert mountains visible in the background. Sarah turned the photo over. Written on the back in faded ink, "If found, please call 602-555-0178. Max is a hero. Bring him home." Before Sarah could process this discovery, another crack of thunder shook the building. This time, Max reacted differently. His ears flattened, and he began to pant rapidly. Sarah recognized the signs immediately. The thunder was triggering his PTSD, reminding him of explosions in Afghanistan. "It's okay, boy," she soothed, placing her hand firmly on his back. "You're safe. We're not there anymore." But Max wasn't calming. His breathing accelerated, and his good eye darted frantically around the room. When the next thunderclap hit, he bolted upright, a high-pitched whine escaping him. Sarah acted on instinct, recalling her training with combat veterans suffering from PTSD. She moved directly in front of Max, blocked his vision of the windows, and spoke in a firm, steady voice. "Attention," she commanded. To her amazement, Max responded immediately, his posture shifting into a rigid stance despite his obvious distress. "Stand down, soldier," she continued, maintaining eye contact. "Mission accomplished. Stand down." Gradually, Max's breathing slowed. He remained at attention, but the panic in his eyes subsided. Sarah kept her hand on his shoulder, providing steady pressure. Dr. Anderson watched this interaction with undisguised astonishment. "How did you know to do that?" "Combat medicine includes managing PTSD," Sarah replied, not taking her eyes off Max. "The thunderstorm triggered him. Sounded like explosions." Through the glass partition, Sarah could see the Turners and Prescott watching this scene with expressions ranging from curiosity to disdain. Charles Turner was speaking into his phone, gesturing emphatically despite the poor reception caused by the storm. Dr. Peterson emerged from the NICU core, her face grim. "Preliminary tox screen shows traces of digoxin in the baby's system. That's a heart medication, one that would cause exactly the symptoms we saw. Someone deliberately administered it to her." The accusation hung in the air like the electricity from the storm outside. Security personnel moved immediately to seal off the area, while Detective Reed, who had remained quietly observant until now, stepped forward. "I need a list of everyone who had access to the infant in the last 3 hours," he instructed. "And I mean everyone," as the investigation sprang into action around her. Sarah remained kneeling beside Max, the dog tags clutched in one hand, her other still steadying the trembling dog. Through the windows, lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes, each followed by thunder that made Max flinch despite his training. "We'll get through this," she promised him. The words meant for the dog, the baby, and perhaps herself. "Whatever happens, we'll get through this together." The storm raged outside St. Luke's Hospital, transforming day into twilight. Inside, a different kind of storm brewed as Detective Reed systematically interviewed everyone who had access to Baby Hope during the critical time frame. Security footage showed 17 different individuals entering the NICU, including doctors, nurses, custodial staff, and, briefly, Charles Turner, who had insisted on seeing his granddaughter despite protocol. Sarah remained near the NICU, unwilling to leave Baby Hope unprotected again. Max had calmed somewhat, though each thunderclap still caused his ears to flatten. The dog tags felt heavy in Sarah's pocket, a tangible connection to Max's past and the man who had trained him. "I've called the number," Detective Reed informed her quietly, joining her in the small waiting area. "It's still active. Belongs to a James Wilson, currently residing in Tucson." Sarah's heart skipped. "Max's handler. He's alive." Reed nodded. "Medically retired from the Army. Lost his right leg in the same IED explosion that separated him from Max. He's been searching for his dog for 3 years." Reed glanced at Max with newfound respect. "Says he never believed the official report that Max died in Afghanistan. kept looking even after he returned stateside. The revelation struck Sarah like a physical blow. All this time, Max had been lost and alone, while somewhere in Arizona, the man who loved him had been searching. The cruelty of their separation, the wasted years, felt overwhelming. "Is he coming here?" she asked. "Driving up from Tucson now. Should arrive by evening, assuming the storm doesn't close the highways." Reed hesitated. "There's something else you should know. The hospital administration is under pressure from the Turners. They've threatened a lawsuit if Baby Hope isn't transferred to Phoenix Memorial once she's stable." Sarah stiffened. "She was deliberately poisoned. The last thing we should do is move her." "I agree, but this is becoming politically complicated." Reed lowered his voice further. "Charles Turner just placed a call to Governor Harrison. They're golfing buddies, apparently." Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Anderson approached, his expression grave. "Toxicology confirmed it digoxin poisoning. Someone administered a small but potentially lethal dose. If we hadn't caught it when we did—" He left the sentence unfinished. "Do we know who?" Sarah asked. "Security cameras show several people near the incubator, but no clear evidence of anyone administering medication improperly." Dr. Anderson ran a hand through his thinning hair. "The Turners are insisting this proves St. Luke's is negligent and demanding immediate transfer." "It proves someone here tried to harm her," Sarah countered. "Moving her could be exactly what they want." The implication hung heavily in the air. Could someone have deliberately poisoned a newborn to justify moving her to another facility? The thought was almost too monstrous to contemplate. "The Turners are in the director's office now," Dr. Anderson continued. "With Prescott, they've brought in a specialist from Phoenix Memorial who's prepared to testify that our NICU isn't equipped to handle a case like this." Sarah felt a cold anger building within her. This isn't about medical care. This is about control, about silencing Jessica's accusations. "Be careful, Sarah," Dr. Anderson warned. "These are powerful people with significant influence." "They're people who ignored their daughter when she needed them most," Sarah replied. "People who chose reputation over justice." Max, who had been resting at Sarah's feet, suddenly raised his head, ears forward. A moment later, Sarah heard it too. Raised voices from the direction of the hospital entrance. She moved to the window overlooking the front parking lot, Max following close behind. Below, despite the pouring rain, a small crowd had gathered. News vans with satellite dishes lined the street, and reporters in rain gear stood under umbrellas, cameras rolling. A hospital security guard was attempting to move them back from the entrance. "Word's gotten out," Reed observed, joining Sarah at the window. "Anonymous tip to the media about a hero dog saving an abandoned baby and the subsequent poisoning attempt." "Anonymous?" Sarah asked. Reed shrugged. "Not from my department. My money's on a hospital employee sympathetic to Jessica's situation." The elevator doors opened, and Charles Turner emerged, flanked by his wife, their attorney, and Dr. Prescott. Their faces darkened when they spotted Sarah, Max, and Detective Reed. "This media circus is completely inappropriate," Charles Turner began, his Boston accent more pronounced in anger. "Someone has deliberately sensationalized a private family tragedy." "Privacy wasn't your concern when you called the governor," Reed replied evenly. Turner's face flushed. I was merely ensuring proper protocols are followed. That child is my granddaughter. She belongs with her family." "Your daughter didn't think so," Sarah said quietly. "She chose to protect Hope from you." Mrs. Turner flinched as if struck. For the first time, Sarah noticed the woman's hands trembling, her gaze repeatedly darting toward Dr. Prescott before dropping to the floor. "Margaret, get in the car," Charles instructed his wife sharply. "This discussion is pointless." But Mrs. Turner remained rooted in place, her face a mask of indecision. "Charles, maybe we should—" "Not now, Margaret." His tone brooked no argument. Prescott stepped forward, his manner smoothly professional. "The transfer authorization has been approved. A medical transport team from Phoenix Memorial will arrive within the hour, weather permitting." Dr. Anderson shook his head. "I haven't authorized any transfer, as Baby Hope's attending physician." "The hospital director has overridden your authority in this matter," Prescott interrupted. "Given the attempted poisoning, he agrees the infant requires the security and advanced care only Phoenix Memorial can provide." Sarah felt the floor tilt beneath her. They were going to take Hope away, place her under Prescott's influence. Within the Turners' control, everything Jessica had feared would come to pass. "This isn't over," Reed stated firmly. "The poisoning is under active criminal investigation. Moving the victim from the scene could constitute interference." Prescott's smile never reached his eyes. "Detective, I understand your concern, but medical necessity takes precedence. I'm sure your investigation can continue at Phoenix Memorial." As this confrontation unfolded, Sarah noticed Max's behavior changing subtly. The dog had positioned himself between her and Prescott, his posture alert but not aggressive. When Prescott gestured during his remarks, Max tracked the movement with laser-like focus. A sudden commotion from the hospital entrance drew everyone's attention. A security guard was escorting a young man through the lobby, a teenager, soaking wet from the rain, clutching a backpack to his chest. "I need to see Detective Reed," the boy was insisting. "It's about Jessica Turner." Reed moved quickly to intercept them. "I'm Detective Reed. Who are you?" "My name's Tyler Manning. I mow lawns at Sunset View Apartments." The boy glanced nervously at the assembled group, then continued in a rushed whisper. "Jessica, Ms. Turner, she gave me this last week. Said if anything happened to her, I should bring it to the police." He unzipped his backpack and withdrew a sealed plastic container. "It's her laptop and some other stuff." Charles Turner stepped forward. "That's my daughter's property. It should come to us." Tyler backed away, clutching the container protectively. "She specifically said not to give it to her parents. Said they couldn't be trusted." The accusation hung in the air like an exposed nerve. Mrs. Turner made a small, wounded sound, while her husband's face darkened with fury. "You have no right," he began, but Reed intervened. "This is potential evidence in an ongoing investigation," the detective stated, accepting the container from Tyler. "It will be logged and processed according to protocol." Outside, lightning split the sky, followed almost instantly by a deafening crack of thunder. The hospital lights flickered ominously. Max pressed against Sarah's leg, trembling slightly but maintaining his disciplined stance. "We need to check on Hope," Sarah said to Dr. Anderson, desperate to escape the charged atmosphere of the lobby. They had taken only a few steps toward the elevator when the commotion outside intensified through the glass doors. Sarah could see a news crew attempting to interview someone who had just arrived, a man in a rain-soaked jacket, struggling with crutches on the slick pavement. "That's Wilson," Reed said quietly. "Max's handler." Before anyone could react, Max's head snapped toward the entrance. His entire body went rigid, ears forward, attention locked on the figure outside. A high, keening whine escaped him, the first vocal sound he'd made since entering the hospital with hope. "Max," Sarah whispered. "Is that him? Is that your person?" The dog trembled with barely contained emotion, but made no move to run toward the entrance. Instead, he looked up at Sarah, then back at the doors, caught between his former handler and the woman who had become his new ally. Charles Turner seized this moment of distraction. "We're going to check on our granddaughter," he announced, heading for the elevator with Prescott and his wife. Sarah moved to follow, but Dr. Anderson caught her arm. "Let me handle this," he said urgently. "You need to deal with that." He nodded toward the entrance, where James Wilson was now visible through the glass doors, searching the lobby with desperate hope. Sarah hesitated, torn between protecting baby Hope and acknowledging what Max clearly needed. The dog continued to whine softly, looking between Sarah and the entrance. "Go," Reed urged her. "I'll keep an eye on the Turners. This moment has been 3 years coming for both of them." Nodding, Sarah moved toward the entrance, Max matching her step for step despite his obvious agitation. As they approached the automatic doors, the man outside spotted them, his face transformed with disbelief, joy, and painful hope. "Max," he called, his voice barely audible through the glass and rain. "Max, is that you, boy?" The German shepherd froze, trembling violently now. Sarah knelt beside him, one hand steadying his scarred flank. "It's okay," she whispered. "You can go to him. It's okay." For 3 heartbeats, Max remained rooted in place. Then, as the doors slid open, he bolted forward with a joyous bark that echoed through the lobby. The reunion between Max and Staff Sergeant James Wilson unfolded like a scene from a dream, both surreal and achingly real. The German shepherd launched himself toward his handler, somehow restraining his excitement enough to avoid knocking the man off his crutches. Wilson dropped to one knee despite his prosthetic leg, arms encircling the dog's scarred body as Max whined and trembled against him. "I knew it," Wilson kept repeating, his voice breaking. "I knew you were alive. I never stopped looking for you, buddy." Sarah stood back, throat tight with emotion, watching this fragment of wholeness restored in a broken world. Hospital staff and visitors had paused to witness the moment, many openly wiping away tears. Even the news crews maintained a respectful distance, filming quietly without shouted questions. Rain continued to pour outside, but inside the hospital lobby, time seemed suspended in this bubble of pure joy. Max licked Wilson's face, tail wagging so hard his entire body shook. The soldier buried his face in the dog's fur, shoulders shaking with what Sarah realized were silent sobs. When Wilson finally looked up, his eyes found Sarah's. "You found him," he said, voice rough with emotion. "You're the nurse who called." Sarah approached slowly, kneeling beside them. Actually, he found me, and he saved a baby's life in the process. Wilson looked at Max with pride mixing with confusion. That sounds like quite a story. It is, Sarah agreed. And it's still unfolding. She glanced toward the elevators, anxiety returning. In fact, I need to get back upstairs. There's a newborn in danger, and Max has been helping protect her. Wilson nodded without hesitation, rising awkwardly on his crutches. Then we'll help you. Max is still on duty. It seems. The unusual trio made their way to the elevators, leaving the clamor of the lobby behind. In the enclosed space, Wilson studied Max closely, fingers gently examining old scars and injuries. "What happened to him?" Sarah asked quietly. After the explosion, Wilson's expression darkened. "I was medevaced immediately. Lost consciousness before we even reached the helicopter. When I woke up in Germany 3 days later, they told me Max was missing, presumed killed." His hand tightened on Max's head. "I never believed it. We had a connection. I would have known if he died." "How did he end up in Phoenix?" "That's what I've spent 3 years trying to figure out." Wilson shook his head. "After I medically retired, I moved to Tucson and kept searching, posted in military forums, called shelters, visited every rescue organization in Arizona." His eyes returned to Max. "Someone must have brought him back from Afghanistan. But why they didn't scan his chip or contact the military working dog program." The elevator doors opened to reveal Detective Reed waiting for them, his expression tense. "We have a situation," he said without preamble. "Dr. Prescott is attempting to expedite the baby's transfer. He's brought in a specialist who's claiming Baby Hope needs treatment only available at Phoenix Memorial." Sarah felt cold fear settle in her stomach. "We can't let them take her." Reed nodded toward Wilson. "This your handler." After quick introductions, they moved briskly toward the NICU. Reed updated them as they walked. "I've started examining the contents of Jessica's laptop. It's password protected, but she left a note with the password in the container. What I've found so far is disturbing." "How so?" Sarah asked. Jessica documented everything: her relationship with Prescott, the assault, the pregnancy. But there's more. She had access to patient records at Phoenix Memorial through a colleague. She found evidence that Prescott has been involved in at least 3 other cases where female residents or nurses suddenly left the program after filing complaints. Sarah felt sick. A pattern. And each time, the complaint disappeared. 2 of the women received significant settlements with non-disclosure agreements. Reed lowered his voice as they approached the NICU. "What's more concerning is Jessica's documentation of conversations with her father. According to her journals and recorded phone calls, Charles Turner knew about Prescott's history. He helped cover up previous incidents because of their friendship and shared business interests." Wilson, who had been listening silently, shook his head in disgust. "And now they want custody of Jessica's baby, after enabling her abuser." "Exactly," Reed confirmed. "Jessica knew all this. She left the evidence for us to find. But she was afraid no one would believe her, that her parents' influence would bury the truth again." They reached the NICU to find Dr. Anderson in heated conversation with Charles Turner, Mrs. Turner, Dr. Prescott, and an unfamiliar physician in Phoenix Memorial Scrubs. "The transport team is already en route," the unfamiliar doctor was saying. "Baby Hope requires specialized cardiac monitoring that your facility simply doesn't provide." "That's simply not true," Dr. Anderson countered. "Our cardiac monitoring capabilities are fully adequate. What that child needs most is stability and security, not to be moved across town during an investigation into who poisoned her." Charles Turner spotted their approach and stiffened. His gaze traveled from Sarah to Max to Wilson, narrowing with calculation. "I see the media circus continues," he remarked coldly. "First a stray dog, now a disabled veteran. My daughter's tragedy has become quite the spectacle." Wilson stepped forward, his military bearing evident despite the crutches. "Sir, with all due respect, I don't know what's happening here, but I do know that dog." He nodded toward Max. "He's one of the most highly trained military working dogs ever to serve. If he's protecting that baby, he has good reason." "This is absurd," Prescott interjected. "We're discussing proper medical care for a critically ill newborn, not indulging fairy tales about hero dogs." Inside the NICU, Baby Hope lay in her incubator, tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. She had been extubated, now breathing on her own with supplemental oxygen. A nurse stood vigilant beside her, watching the monitors with careful attention. Mrs. Turner had drifted away from the argument, moving closer to the glass to observe her granddaughter. Sarah noticed the woman's hands trembling, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Mrs. Turner," Sarah said quietly, approaching her. "I know you want what's best for Hope." The older woman startled slightly. "Of course I do. She's all we have left of Jessica." "Is she," Sarah asked gently, "or is she a reminder of something your husband wants to hide?" Mrs. Turner's face paled. "You don't understand. It's complicated. I understand that Jessica was afraid enough to hide her pregnancy, to give birth alone, to trust a stray dog with her baby's safety rather than her own parents." Sarah held the woman's gaze steadily. "What does that tell you?" Before Mrs. Turner could respond, Detective Reed cleared his throat loudly. "I need everyone's attention," he announced, holding up his phone. "I've just received the final toxicology report on the substance used to poison Baby Hope. It was pharmaceutical-grade digoxin, the same formulation used at Phoenix Memorial, not the version stocked here at St. Luke's." The revelation landed like a thunderbolt. All eyes turned to Dr. Prescott, whose expression remained impassive. "That means nothing," he said dismissively. "Anyone could have brought it from another hospital." "True," Reed acknowledged. "However, there's something else you should know." He nodded to a uniformed officer who had just arrived. "We've executed a search warrant on Dr. Prescott's vehicle. We found a vial of digoxin in the glove compartment. The lot number matches what was found in the baby's system." Charles Turner stepped away from Prescott as if the man had suddenly burst into flames. "William, what have you done?" Prescott's composure finally cracked. "Nothing that can be proven, and certainly nothing you didn't tacitly approve. Charles, we both agreed this situation needed to be contained." Mrs. Turner made a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Contained? You tried to kill our granddaughter. No one was supposed to die," Prescott hissed. just enough to justify transfer to my hospital, where things could be properly managed. The Phoenix Memorial doctor backed away, horror evident on his face. I had no idea I was told the baby needed specialized care. Officer Jenkins, Reed said quietly, please place Dr. Prescott under arrest. As the officer moved forward, Prescott's face contorted with rage. He lunged toward the NICU door, shoving past Dr. Anderson. This is absurd. You have no proof. Max reacted instantly, positioning himself between Prescott and the NICU entrance. The low growl that emanated from the dog's chest stopped Prescott in his tracks. Call off your mutt, Prescott demanded, looking at Sarah and Wilson. He's not a mutt, Wilson replied calmly. He's a highly trained military working dog who detects threats. And right now, you're registering as a major one. Officer Jenkins approached with handcuffs. Dr. William Prescott, you're under arrest for attempted murder and evidence tampering. You have the right to remain silent. As Prescott was led away, still protesting his innocence, Mrs. Turner collapsed into a nearby chair, face buried in her hands. Her husband stood frozen, the full implications of his role in this tragedy seemingly dawning on him. Charles, she said, voice muffled. Did you know? Did you know what he was going to do? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Charles Turner's face had gone ashen, decades of authority and confidence stripped away in moments. Sarah turned her attention back to baby Hope, who slept peacefully, unaware of the drama surrounding her existence. Through the glass, Sarah could see the steady rise and fall of the tiny chest, the color now healthy in the small face. She's going to be okay, Dr. Anderson said, joining her. Physically, at least. And her future? Sarah asked. Detective Reed approached, tucking his phone away. That's becoming clearer. I've just reviewed more of Jessica's files. She left a formal will, prepared by a lawyer friend. In it, she explicitly names you, Sarah Mitchell, as her preferred guardian for her child. Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Me? But I barely knew her. According to her journal, she'd been watching you for months. She writes that she saw in you the kind of strength and compassion my daughter will need in this world. Reed's expression softened. She also noted your military background, your experience with trauma. She believed you would understand what it means to rebuild after everything falls apart. Max pressed against Sarah's leg, his warm presence anchoring her as the implications washed over her. Wilson stood nearby, watching her reaction with quiet understanding. It won't be simple, Reed continued. The Turners will likely contest the will, but with what we've discovered about Charles Turner's role in covering up Prescott's behavior, their position has been significantly weakened. Mrs. Turner looked up, her face tear-stained but resolute. I won't contest it, she said quietly. Charles might, but I won't. Jessica made her wishes clear. I failed her in life. I won't fail her in death. Her husband stared at her in disbelief. Margaret, no, Charles, it's over. All of it. She rose shakily to her feet. I want to make a statement. Detective, about everything I know regarding William Prescott and my husband's involvement. As Reed led Mrs. Turner away to take her statement, Sarah found herself standing between Wilson and Max. The three of them, united by circumstance and something deeper, something that felt remarkably like purpose. "What happens now?" Wilson asked quietly. Sarah looked through the glass at baby Hope, then down at Max, then back to the soldier who had crossed the state to find his dog. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think we're about to find out." 1 year later, Sarah Mitchell stood in the small garden behind her newly purchased home in Tempe, watching as the morning sunlight filtered through the leaves of a young mesquite tree. The tree had been planted 6 months earlier in a small ceremony honoring Jessica Turner, a living memorial that would grow stronger with each passing year. "Coffee's ready," called James Wilson from the back door, his prosthetic leg now barely noticeable in his fluid movements. He had abandoned his crutches months ago, the physical therapy finally yielding results he'd almost stopped believing possible. Sarah smiled, turning toward the voice that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. "Be right there," she called back. "Just checking on our gardener." Their gardener was Max, now officially retired from military service with honors, digging enthusiastically in a designated patch of earth where Sarah had planted pet-safe flowers. The German shepherd's scars remained, but his coat had regained its healthy shine, and the clouding in his injured eye had improved with proper veterinary care. At 9 years old, he moved with the dignity of a senior dog who had seen too much, but had finally found peace. Inside the modest 3-bedroom house, Hope sat in her high chair, 10 months old and determined to feed herself breakfast, despite the spectacular mess this created. Her dark curls and serious eyes were pure Jessica, a daily reminder of the woman who had entrusted Sarah with her most precious creation. "Someone's being independent this morning," James observed, wiping yogurt from Hope's chin with practiced ease. "Like mother, like daughter," Sarah replied, accepting the coffee mug he offered. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, a small contact that still sent warmth through her chest. Life had transformed with dizzying speed after that stormy day at St. Luke's Hospital. The media had seized upon the story: a suicidal nurse, a heroic stray military dog, a poisoned baby, and a prominent doctor's arrest. For weeks, reporters had camped outside the hospital, clamoring for interviews and photographs. Sarah had protected Hope from the circus as best she could, grateful when James offered his small rental house in Tucson as a temporary sanctuary away from the spotlight. What had begun as a practical arrangement, Sarah needed a safe place for herself, Max, and Hope. James had space and understood the value of privacy had evolved organically into something neither had been looking for, but both desperately needed. The legal battle for Hope's custody had been mercifully brief. Margaret Turner, after giving a complete statement about her husband's involvement with Dr. Prescott, had supported Jessica's wishes. Charles Turner, facing potential criminal charges himself, had eventually withdrawn his petition for custody, accepting supervised visitation rights instead. Dr. William Prescott now awaited trial on multiple charges, including attempted murder and several counts of sexual assault as other victims came forward. His medical license had been revoked, his reputation destroyed. The scandal had reached beyond Phoenix, exposing a pattern of protection for powerful men within the medical establishment that had persisted for decades. "Your hearing is at 10, James reminded Sarah, glancing at the kitchen clock. "Want me to come along?" Today marked the final step in Sarah's journey to become Hope's legal guardian. After months of home studies, background checks, and temporary custody, the court would make its determination permanent. "No, you stay with Hope," Sarah replied. "It's just a formality at this point. Besides, someone needs to finish setting up for the barbecue." They had invited a small group to celebrate afterward: Dr. Anderson and his wife, Detective Reed, a few nurses from St. Luke's, and Margaret Turner, who had separated from Charles and begun the slow process of rebuilding her relationship with her granddaughter. The doorbell rang, and Max trotted in from the garden, alert but no longer anxious around visitors. His PTSD symptoms had diminished with time and stability, though thunderstorms still required special handling. "That'll be Maria," James said, referring to the social worker who had been assigned to Hope's case. "She's always early." Sarah opened the door to find not only Maria Lopez, but also Dr. Anderson, arriving ahead of schedule with a large teddy bear tucked under his arm. I know I'm early," the older doctor said, grinning sheepishly. "But I wanted to drop this off before heading to my shift." He presented the bear to Hope, who squealed with delight. "A little congratulations gift for our favorite tiny human," Maria smiled, clipboard in hand. "I just need a few signatures before the hearing, Sarah. Then we can carpool to the courthouse if you'd like." As they settled at the kitchen table to handle the paperwork, Dr. Anderson updated them on the latest hospital news. After the events surrounding Hope's dramatic arrival, St. Luke's had implemented several new programs, including a support system for healthcare workers experiencing harassment or assault, and most significantly to Sarah, a therapy dog program inspired by Max. "The first 2 dogs complete their training next month," Dr. Anderson reported proudly. "The difference they're making for long-term patients is remarkable." Sarah glanced at Max, who had settled protectively near Hope's high chair. "He set a high standard." "He certainly did. Which reminds me," Dr. Anderson reached into his pocket and produced an envelope. "The hospital board approved this unanimously. It's not much, but we wanted to make it official." Inside was a certificate naming Max as the first honorary therapy dog of St. Luke's Hospital, along with a professional photograph of the German Shepherd in a special vest with the hospital's logo. "They want to hang his portrait in the main lobby," Dr. Anderson added. "Next to the plaque commemorating Jessica." Sarah felt her throat tighten. The hospital had created a small memorial for Jessica Turner, acknowledging both the tragedy of her death and the institutional failures that had contributed to it. The accompanying scholarship fund for nursing students had already helped 3 young women pursue their education. "She would have appreciated that," Sarah said softly. "Especially the scholarship." After finishing the paperwork and seeing Dr. Anderson off to his shift, Sarah prepared for court. She chose a simple blue dress, professional, but not stuffy, and the small silver pendant James had given her on their 6-month anniversary. "You look beautiful," James said, watching her from the doorway of their bedroom. What had begun as separate rooms had evolved into shared space 3 months earlier, their relationship deepening with quiet certainty. "Just want to make a good impression," Sarah replied, though the judge had already indicated his support for the permanent guardianship. James crossed to her, taking her hands in his. "Sarah Mitchell, you saved a baby's life, helped catch a predator, reunited me with my dog, and somehow managed to start a therapy dog program in your spare time. I think the impression is pretty well established." She laughed, the sound still surprising her sometimes, this ease, This happiness she'd never expected to find again after Afghanistan. When you put it that way, I do put it that way. He kissed her gently. You're extraordinary, and we're the luckiest family in Arizona to have found you. Family? The word still felt new, fragile, yet powerful. After the hearing, it would be official. Hope would be hers to raise, to protect, to love. The journey from combat nurse to mother had never been part of Sarah's plan. But now she couldn't imagine any other path. The courthouse proceedings were brief and without drama, a welcome change after the media frenzy that had surrounded Hope's early days. Judge Ramirez reviewed the case file, noted the comprehensive home study reports, and without hesitation granted Sarah permanent legal guardianship of Hope Turner. Ms. Mitchell, the judge said, smiling warmly, it's clear to this court that you have provided an exceptional home for this child, while the circumstances that brought you together were tragic. The bond you've formed is anything but. May your future together be blessed. Sarah signed the final documents with steady hands, official confirmation of what her heart had known since that stormy day when a scarred German shepherd had carried a black garbage bag into St. Luke's Hospital. Outside the courthouse, Maria offered her congratulations. In all my years as a social worker, I've never seen a case quite like this one, she admitted. But I've also never been more certain of a placement. Hope belongs with you, Sarah. The afternoon barbecue unfolded under perfect Arizona skies, the October heat finally giving way to pleasant warmth. Their small backyard filled with people who had become essential parts of their unconventional family story. Detective Reed, recently promoted, brought his wife and teenage son, who immediately took to playing fetch with Max. Dr. Anderson and several nurses from St. Luke's arrived bearing gifts and casseroles. Margaret Turner came last, uncertain but welcomed, bearing a handmade quilt she'd created for Hope using fabric from Jessica's childhood clothes. As the gathering continued into early evening, Sarah found a quiet moment to step away. She stood beneath the young mesquite tree, watching James show Hope how to gentle pet Max's head, the little girl's laughter blending with the murmur of conversation and the soft music playing from the patio speakers. You'd be proud of her, Sarah whispered to the tree, to Jessica, to the universe. She's strong, like you, determined. I'll make sure she knows how brave her mother was. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, the sound carrying clearly in the desert air. Max lifted his head, ears perked, then returned his attention to Hope, who had settled against his side with the complete trust of a child who had never known anything but love from the scarred shepherd. Family. Sarah thought again, watching them, not what she had expected, not what she had planned, but exactly what she needed. What they all needed, a second chance, hard-won and precious. As if sensing her thoughts, James looked up and met her gaze across the yard, his smile holding promises neither of them had dared to make a year ago. Hope waved enthusiastically from her spot beside Max, one hand clutching the dog's fur, the other reaching for Sarah. "Mama," she called clearly, the word new and perfect. Mama, dog, and Sarah Mitchell, former combat nurse, guardian, and unexpected mother, moved toward them, toward home. Life has a way of finding us when we're most broken, doesn't it? like Sarah and Max. Many of us came back from war, some from Vietnam, others from deserts far away, carrying wounds both visible and hidden. We know what it means to rebuild, to wonder if we'll ever feel whole again. Remember how you felt watching that German shepherd carry that garbage bag into the hospital? That's the power of purpose, reborn. In our generation, we've seen darkness. We've witnessed how the powerful can prey on the vulnerable, how systems fail those who need them most. But we've also seen what happens when someone refuses to look away, when someone stands their ground despite the storm. Sarah didn't set out to become Hope's mother any more than Max planned to become a hero. They simply answered the call placed before them. In the twilight of our lives, isn't that what matters most? Not the battles we've lost, but the moments we chose courage over comfort, purpose over pain, like that mesquite